we just wanted to say thank you for letting us come and have this training. I think these trainings, we all love doing these trainings, and they're extremely important. As I said many times throughout the training, like really collaborating between each other and with us, it's really when it's gonna help kind of like tackle this cyanobacteria problem in a way, you know, having more monitoring, having more awareness. We're constantly thinking of ideas of like having webinars with that have like the latest research on cyanobacteria. We had the Controls and Management Forum. So we're constantly thinking of new information to put out there, and you can find on the cyanos.org page and in a YouTube channel. So yeah, this program keeps growing, and we thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And we can take any questions if you have them. Yes.
So we can notice a film on top of the water, and that is an indicator of a cyanobacteria bloom. But is it necessarily a harmful bloom, or are all blooms harmful? Are all blooms releasing toxins that are poisonous?
Right. No, not all blooms are harmful. Again, you can have what it could be seen. It could be pollen. It could be green algae. It could be cyanobacteria. Once you have determined that it's cyanobacteria, even then, it's not necessarily harmful. They are the research is still out on why and when they produce toxins. We just know that certain genera produce toxins and which toxins they produce, but we still really don't know why. What are the environmental factors? Is it yeah? There's still not a lot known in that, and there's a lot of research on that. So that's why in our monitoring program we have the, you know, you recognize the dirty dozen, and if you do have those or any of those type of cyanobacteria, then you want to be more aware and at a higher like alert to that could potentially be toxic. Rather, if you just have green algae, that's not going to be toxic. It's going to be a nuisance, but it's not going to be toxic. If your dog eats something like a mat of green algae, that is not going to be the same effect as eating a cyanobacteria scum or mat.
Kind of similar to that, it's, you know, if you are, you know, expanding into the monitoring, you see a film and you take a slide and you do see that it is one, you know, it is a cyanobacteria. It's kind of like, when in doubt, probably stay out. You know, you're seeing like a bloom of these cyanobacteria species, but if you don't have capability for toxin testing, you might not want to take that risk. But again, it goes back to self-risk assessment.
Yeah.
What would it take for a group like us to do that kind of testing where we not only determine that it is cyanobacteria, but it's harmful and releasing toxins? I mean, is that like lots of equipment? I know it's not just a fluorometer.
Oh.
You would have to contract that probably out to a lab because
that's something we'd be able to do on our own.
No, yeah, it's some specialized equipment.
Yeah.
It's called ELISA testing.
Yeah. And toxin analysis, toxin test is expensive.
Yes.
So that's why it's, you know, not many people have it done. So it's more when in doubt, stay it out. Like, you know. Yes.
I just want to reiterate on that. If you see anything, just contact your Board of Health or Department of Natural Resources, and they can get those resources.
Yeah. And back there, do you have a question? Oh, right. And I have a question for you, Sydney. Do you know of any toxin tests that can be done, like a lab that has the capacity for it here?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
We do have a gentleman who does come out and do weekly or bi-weekly testing at all of our ponds. Monitor the cyanobacteria. That's a question for the Board of Health.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where they send them.
I've heard that there's doing it at the
Yes.
what's all.
Yeah.
I think they have to do it.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have an idea non-toxic and toxic nature, non-dangerologies, percentage-wise every time you test it? Is it more one than the other, or which?
The toxin versus not toxic genera? No.
You don't
No,
have to
it can vary a lot. Like ponds that, say, let's have a pond that has a constant reoccurring microcystin blooms, and that microcystis is producing microcystin, which is a toxin. That, like there really is not. We still don't know why they produce the toxins. So sometimes the blooms can have toxins and sometimes they can't. Like even though that bloom currently has the same type of genera, sometimes they can produce it, sometimes they can't.
Unfortunately, it's almost like a gene expression.
Yeah.
Like expressing the type of gene, that, produce that toxin. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and there was a stream that had a huge mat of rubidium. Tested the water, it wasn't toxic, but then we had gotten samples into the lab that, they don't look that bad, but they're
very toxic.
So
Yeah.
it's unfortunately that's, I hate to say it, sometimes it depends.
Yeah.
Like,
We have no answer.
nobody likes that answer, so.
Yeah.
I see the next year or so just defining the parameters particular to this pond. 'Cause like you say, every pond's different.
Yeah.
So it's going to take sampling and just determining and
Right.
trying to determine trends and all that. But is there anything that you might be able to say is attributed to just the sediment on the bottom, just the collection of leaves and debris that lands on the bottom that could be generating this too? I mean, we may find out that that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
It might not be. And I'm sure it is fertilizers too, but it might be.
Yeah.
To a large extent, just what's
Like organic matter,
what's in the
just
biomass right
yeah, it could be. And yeah, that's how ponds work in a way. Like they go through these cycles where they release nutrients into. So that's like a very common thing that happens in all ponds and lakes. The problem is when the sediments are really rich on nutrients, and that's mainly because of fertilizers, runoff, whatever, or even legacy nutrients. So yeah, that is something that you need to know about your system. Does it have a legacy nutrient problem or not?
Is dredging a pond a possibility?
It is a possibility. It's super expensive, but that has been done. Yeah.
That would remove legacy nutrients.
Yeah, you're just dredging it out.
But definitely an intensive type.
Yeah, and that's kind of like going back to that forum that we had, like that he really talked about all the different types of controls and the advantages and disadvantages, and that I think it's really helpful for making a decision, because again, every pond is different, and the problems are different, and also budget. What do you have the budget for?
And they'll give you an idea of what type of treatments maybe would work for your pond. But explore your options. I think that's,
yeah.
And once you get an idea of your system.
So would the sediments on the bottom of a pond being nutrient rich be considered fertilizer for somebody?
Like if you remove them and then you can reuse it?
Is that sediment considered hazardous waste?
Oh, I see. There are some techniques that try to reuse it. I guess that depends on if it's legacy nutrients, does it have also heavy metals? Again, every system is different. Yeah. So there has to be a study. And I guess I would just say that the more you know your system, you are in a better position to make better decisions.
If a pond has heavy phosphorus that we know the source it came from, is that phosphorus, is it like an additive process from storm runoff and septic system leaching? Is that adding to the amount of phosphorus all the time, or does phosphorus somehow go away?
No, it is adding. Yeah.
So once Joint Base Cape Cod dumped a load of phosphorus into our pond, we should hold them responsible forever.
Well, I'm not gonna get into the politics, but it is still there.
What's the benefit of the sediment?
Yeah.
It's very tough to get rid of.
Yeah, especially in Kettle Ponds, that you don't have, there's not an outflow. So.
But how are you going to blame them more than anyone that's just fertilizing their lawns around the
This
same
is
place?
a lot of
It,
There's
yeah.
different factors.
yeah, a lot of big driver. This is non-point source, type pollution, and that's just unfortunately there's not one thing you can point to.
Right.
Well, there was actually a study done by Joint Base Cape Cod to measure the outflow of phosphorus from the base into our pond. That study has already been done. We know that they were responsible.
One thing is a few towns in Massachusetts where they allow people that live on the pond is use fertilizer without chemicals, pure just fertilizer, and that is a halfway meet compromise.
Yeah, and there's like I know for a fact that the town of Nantucket they have like a program that they work with for landscapers, so that they have approved landscapers by the town, and they're just trying to get people to use those landscapers because they use the fertilizer that doesn't have phosphorus, and they have
and all that.
And also planting more native species, more native plants instead of like having a lawn.
You showed
that.
What
The-
diagram from New Jersey EPA.
Yeah.
I know that they have a lot of good online resources too for, different types of fertilizer, what to look for, things like that. And,
Yeah.
as I said, like I think native species, things like that, really that are going to retain sediment,
Right.
Absorb any kind of nutrients that are going in. You're going to get less fast loading into your
Yeah.
system.
So what is organic about organic fertilizer versus Scott's step program that we know has nitrogen and phosphorus?
I don't know much about fertilizers, honestly. I just know that nitrogen and phosphorus go into, and those drive. But I specifically don't know about fertilizer companies or.
Usually the fertilizer comes with weed killers and then the lime killers. You mix with the fertilizer, so it helps the grass but kills the other one. Organic is just straight out, just doesn't kill any weeds or dandelions, but just helps the organic grass.
So I wanted to let you guys know there's a lot of resources about what the contributing factors are to cyanobacteria, why it's happening, from a very high level to a very small level. And we're going to be having either a Zoom meeting or a meeting in person with different speakers, so we can address this specific topic, because it's like that's the whole next, there's like the origin and then there's the testing. So does anybody have any more questions about what we learned today for the team? Lori?
Just really two quick ones.
Yeah.
Does when people on spring fed from New Hampshire, which is what I understand, does that help dissipate or lessen the components that would make up the bacteria?
So it has like a lower flush rate. So it would make it actually easier for cyanobacteria. Yeah, but I mean, that again, it could be different. Like I'm not entirely sure about all the Kettle Ponds, so I'm not a hydrologist, so I don't really know how the water flows. I know that they're groundwater fed in some cases. So yeah, I don't.
The less that's flowing out of the system, the more chance there is of cyanobacteria. It's less about what's flowing in than what's heading out of the system.
Yeah.
Turnover.
Yeah.
I think if I remember right, if you of course remember, is it 2 years for whatever comes into this pond to go out watershed wise?
Yeah.
It's a 2-year.
2-year turnaround. Yeah.
And that's part of this whole other town-to-town initiative too. Peters is part of a larger watershed. So I have a diagram of it at the back of the table. And so it starts very much higher than we are, flows all the way down into Mashpee-Wakey, all the way down into Pompanesett Bay. So there are lots of different factors that are contributing to, what's going into our ponds and how we can help as individuals, but also as corporations. And there's all kinds of different projects happening. So we'll put more information out about that in our email and on our website. But we're going to have another meeting about because it's just a big old topic. So, yeah.
Is this particular presentation too presented today on the website, or is this something we can access later?
It's the intro to Cyanobacteria, I think, on our, that's on the Cyanos.org.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of.
What you saw today is already online.
Yes.
Not this
Yeah.
exact one, but all the information.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have training, like short videos on if you want to refresher on the microscope, stuff like that.
And we're always adding to them too, so.
Oh yeah.
We're keeping an eye on
So if someone were to want to be a pond watch person, what's the cost of everything that we've been shown today?
So the kit, the cyanoscope kit, which includes everything except the fluorometer, it's around $800.
The forum, as you said,
1,300.
I'm not totally sure on the cost of it.
Yeah.
That interface with the computer on the
Yeah, that comes in the kit. So that includes the software, the camera, the plankton net, the like all the sampling equipment, the microscope, all that kind of stuff.
So that, in summary, that will tell us that there is cyanobacteria present, but not if it's toxic.
Right.
Right, you have
Yeah.
to send it off to a lab for that.
Yes.
Lori.
And I just want to touch on that.
Yeah.
What's the time frame?
Sorry, ladies, I can't hear Lori. Back. Can't hear. Thank you. Go ahead.
The time frame from the time we first spot it and we download it to the app and actually test it and comes back as far as so that we know.
So if you send it for toxin analysis, or
Yeah.
So start to finish to confirm.
Oh, so if you have your own monitoring program, you'll be doing the microscopy. So you'll know the stuff that we did today. You will know it on that day, and then how you share the results. That's up to you. Do you want to have it on a website or email list? That's up to you. The toxin analysis, you would have to send it to a lab, and that the time frame varies because you can have it express, and then that's within a week. Yeah, but then that's really that's really expensive. It could be months.
Yeah.
Till you know.
There's newer technology coming out that's more of a rapid test.
Yeah.
With handheld readers and things like that. They're fairly expensive.
Right.
But we're working on purchasing more for ourselves so that we can get our capabilities with that. But they are like a handheld reader that it won't tell you, it's not as accurate as sending it off to a lab. But it's almost like, it's exactly like a rapid COVID test where it's just like positive, negative,
Right.
At a certain threshold. So,
Yeah.
but again, they're not as accurate, and unfortunately, a lot of them are just for microcystin, or just for antitoxin, and like we were saying, if you're just looking for one, you might miss a bunch of others. So that's kind of the hard part about the cyanobacteria.
When an advisory is posted, is it based on the presence of a bloom, or is it based on the toxicity report from a lab?
That depends on who's posting the advisory.
Yes.
That could be the town posting the advisory, the local board of health. That could be the state, and they all have the different protocols and methods of determining what a bloom is. So.
That's something that I was going to say. Like, remember we talked about Dave Mason, and I'm sure Mashpee as well. We're going to talk about exactly what we're talking about right now. How our testing is going to be done, if it's going to be done, what their threshold is going to be for parts per billion in the water, and all of that. So we're going to find out more from the town probably in about a month.
That's great.
More specifically. Yep.
If you're a group, you wanted to purchase equipment for the budget. Here, with the microscope, or would you go here?
I have an opinion about that.
I mean, if you're a group on a budget and you have volunteers, I would go bloom watch, and I would probably, I can't tell you exactly what to do, but something like that is much more user friendly and easier to assess results, and then you're going to be able to once you have that, I think you can monitor a lot more long term. You'll get an idea of your species within your system, and then we kind of go back to that when in doubt, stay out. You're going to get an idea of your dominant toxin producing species, and you can kind of keep training people on how to do it and expand your capability there. Versus this definitely takes a lot more analytical experience to really kind of, you'll get the results, but those results are easier to kind of evaluate rather than these results here. And also with the iNaturalist, from the Cyanoscope kit, you're getting, confirmation on your identifications. I think it's on a monthly basis. We go in and we'll identify what's in there and what's, what we kind of identify them down as much as we can. So kind of then you get that confirmation that your training is working, that people are getting those.
And that's a great resource. A great resource that normally a lot of people would have. They would ship that somewhere where they can actually get the taxonomy done. So that, I think, it's a great tool to have.
On that note, so I was having a conversation with somebody out on the dock, and we were talking about it too, right? And so remember, these things are always present in the water. It depends on how concentrated and if they're having a bloom. So just because we take a sample and we identify that there is a harmful one on that slide, it doesn't really mean anything other than that it's present in the water, but it doesn't tell us what concentration.
Right.
Isn't that where that comes in? And that gives you
more a quantitative.
Yeah, but that is true. But again, like that also whether toxic species either. It's kind of this kind of, I'm just saying like a longer term, easier monitoring program would probably, you could do both. Ideally, you would do both.
But is there a way of knowing concentrations with that system?
You would have to do cell counts, and that gets tedious, and it also varies a lot by who's counting, because we all have different eyes and different, so you would have a counter and you would be counting cells.
So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. I mean, I love everything you did. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I'm not negative against it.
No.
But it sort of does raise the question of what value is it? Because we get the microscopes out, we do to see that they're present without knowing if there's a lot of them. We don't know that there's a bloom. What's the value?
Well, if you see a bloom, it depends how you're taking the sample. Like we went through 3 different kinds. So if you're just taking a plankton net and you find that it's there, it's kind of in the middle of the column. If you're taking just a grab sample of a bloom off the surface, then there's a bloom and this is what's present in it.
That's the thing too, is this, kind of everything here gives you a more whole view. Because if you take a fluorescent sample, let's say from your side of the lake, but there's a pico bloom, out there moving up and lower in the water body, but you just do a surface trip, you're gonna miss it.
Right.
So by pairing that kind of with the kit, or even just using the kit, especially because you're gonna capture more of what's in that water column, you get a better view than it's just kind of like, you get a better view of, what is in there. And then, but I understand, you're looking for like a positive, negative type rating.
I guess it comes back to visual. I mean, so all these things help to develop the full picture and picture of time. But really, when it comes down to it, whether you're having a bloom or not, it's whether you see it with any eye.
Yeah, you could have blooms that you can't see though. That's why we say that if you have a monitoring program, you shouldn't just be monitoring when you see a bloom. Like you should have frequent monitoring, because you want to capture what's going on in the system. So yeah.
So like if you have a bloom over there, but the rest don't have a bloom, it's really not a threat, right? To the rest of the area, I mean, if just one bloom's been captured, I mean, how far is the extent that you're gonna?
Yeah, so that is like a very common question, especially like if you remember that picture that we showed of the aerial view of a lake where like one corner was like really high and then on the other corner there wasn't. So that again goes back down to your own risk assessment. Like, there is a bloom in the pond, that it's concentrated at this shore. How you handle that information and how you share that information so that everybody that is recreating in that pond will know that there is a bloom, and then they take their own decisions on like, I don't see a bloom here, and maybe if you have a monitoring program, you can collect samples from both sides, and then you can determine, we see a lot of cyanobacteria in this area, we don't see cyanobacteria in that area.
Right, and that happens. That's kind of one of the reasons why Chris and I wanted to form this whole group and have this training, is because last summer when we did have it seemed like Peters Pond was like completely red, danger zone, all shut down. But in reality, the testing and the bloom were actually here on the public side.
Right.
The wind blows. Chris and I and our little community live on the south side, so there's the public side and the other side. So on our side, we did not see a bloom. We got the advisory posted, but the actual bloom was on this side. And then when we called, do a lot of hand signals to Dave, starts with a D, on the phone, he said, actually, yes, you're right. You can swim and be on your side because the bloom is way far all the way across. So it's exactly what Justin's saying. That's why it's so important for all of us to know our own ponds and like gather from the four corners of each pond, just so that you know what's happening in your zone, like break it down into zones, but also knowing the wind. You know, most of the time the wind is blowing this way, but sometimes it shifts and it blows from the ocean across. So that's going to just change everything.
Yeah.
And the pond gets choppy, like you were saying earlier, and everything moves around. Are you stretching or you need a question?
Raising my hand.
All right.
She had a question.
This is great.
I actually have two questions. What the two websites that we need to be aware of are the two areas for resources would be cyano.org and the Blue Watch. Were there any others we need to be aware of?
So it's Cyanos with an S, like plural, cyanos.org. And that will link you to all the rest. Like that will take you to the YouTube channel, that would take you to the Bloom Watch, that would take you to the Cyanoscope.
And that's on your agenda, guys.
Yeah.
And look at your agenda. There's
Yep.
two
Yeah.
links on there. One is the YouTube channel, and one is the website.
I'd say that's a great resource, and then of course just your local pond website.
Right,
Are
of
going to
course.
post the advisories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And my other question was in the example that you were just giving, and you take samples around the lake and there's only in certain areas, does it make any difference how long you're in the water, like if you're swimming for a long time? I mean, because if the wind is going to change it and the boats in the water are going to change it.
Right.
If you're in the water for like the first half hour, probably no problem. If you're in for 2 or 3 hours.
In that same area,
Yeah.
in just one area that you don't see any blooms, I most likely won't affect you that much.
No, it's not like it's gonna, you're not gonna like, not see a bloom and then 10 minutes later see a bloom.
Yeah.
It's definitely progressive.
Right.
So like we said, if you see it, you'll know it.
Yeah.
Break up easily with boats or wind and disperse.
They could be breaked up and then kind of like dispersed. Yeah, and I guess another time, like it would be what Hillary always mentions, that in the morning they could be higher up and then they go down, just kind of like to shade adapt. But yeah, like blooms normally take between days to weeks to form. So again, all of this is your own personal risk assessment.
Right.
We can't really tell you what to do and when to swim and all that stuff, but the more you know, the better.
It's all about our eyeballs. Like if everybody's just monitoring their zone, depending on what your pond looks like, you're not all frontiers, of course, but just knowing your spot and kind of your pond, I think that's the most helpful, because the first indicator is going to be visual, mostly stress, and then we can do all of our weekly testing with the kits once we get them.
And with dogs, I would just say to be aware of what you find on the beach. Mats can be kind of like pushed onto the beach, and then they're just there. And because the mat is dead, that doesn't mean it's not toxic. Like the toxins could still be in the mat. So just be aware of what your dog is eating while you're walking by the beach. Yeah, that too. Whatever they're playing with, Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Just
Joe?
the pollen is more like the May, then the middle of June disappear, right? So, and the waters are not that warm, so we assume more likely to be pollen and not allergies, right? At this around this time of the year.
Yeah, like the bloom season is normally end of May to October, would you say? Going into November? Yeah, going into November now. But that they like the yeah, about 70. It's above 70.
The higher you get, the more likely they are to allergy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the kit comes with a thermometer, because that is an important thing to monitor, water temperature. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a question, Joe? No? Oh, you were listening.
See any movement? Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. Thank you guys.
Here, I'll give you this.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about a couple things before we go. I'll just speak like this, Jeff. Is that okay? Because I don't know how to do that. So we've had so much information today. Who's feeling a little overwhelmed? I didn't even do all of it and I'm still overwhelmed. So here's what you need to know. Okay, we're drinking from the fire hose today. We're not going to remember everything. Couple techniques. I mean, I know we're all adults, but I'm just going to say them anyway because I'm reminding myself. Watch the videos that they've got posted up on the YouTube channel and at cyanos.org. There's tons of information. It's always being updated. Really familiarize yourself with the Bloom Watch app. Don't wait until you see a bloom to try to figure out, how do I use this app? Go ahead and read it, look at it, try it out. It'll tell you exactly what to do. Chris, what were you going to say?
There's also YouTube videos that are really good on the Bloom Watch app that explain how to download the app and how to use it.
Yep, exactly. And then the other thing that's really helpful, especially because we've gotten so much information today, are just write down your top 3 takeaways for yourself. What did you learn? Top 3. And then tell someone else immediately. Okay, so call somebody, share it with them, because when we share the information through our mouth, then we retain it in our brain. You guys all know that, right? No? Okay, so your top 3, get on the phone, tell somebody. And then in the future, we're going to be sending out an email with more resources posted about how to get kits, what next steps are, and then also we'd like to get together more as different pond groups go in the future. So thank you all for coming. If you guys could please take your chairs and just fold them up and stack them against the back walls, that would be so helpful. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Oh yes, please do the comments. Thank you guys.
Thank you.